Parsha, which is the opening of chapter 9, chapter 10. Vayikra, chapter 10, chapter 9, Pasuk Aleph. So the Pasuk tells us that Vayhi Bayom Hashmini Koro Moshe Aaron Ulevono Ulezikna Israel. He called to Aaron and his sons and to the leaders of the Jewish people, the Zakanim, and he said to them, he said to Aaron that you should take certain korbanos and those were for him and for the whole Jewish people. And then in Pasuk Daled at the end, he says, why do I tell you to take all these things? Ki hayem hazeh, ki hayoim, Hashem nira alichem. He says, today Hashem is going to appear to you. The Abel is going to show himself. Now that tends to indicate that Hashem was expected to show himself, but so far, major reason that hadn't occurred, and therefore Moses said, today it's going to occur. Today, that's the day it's going to happen. And as Rashi himself tells us a little bit further on, and also he hinted at it in last week's parsha. So it would appear from the language of the first pasuk that there's a direct connection and a very severe, what we might call, significance. Oh, marathon. There's a very significant connection between the fact that it's the 8th day that all this is about to occur. In other words, that they'd been working on the Mishkan for quite a time. And then Moshe Rabbeinu, the whole 7 days of the initiation, for up to now we've had 7 full days, and Rashi brings down that Moshe Rabbeinu, every day of those 7 days of initiation, Moshe Rabbeinu put up the Mishkan and took it down every day. Yeah. And according to some opinions, he more than once a day he took it down and put it up. Yeah, more than once a day. The minimal opinion is that he took it down every day and put it up. So there's been a big expectation in the air that something is going to occur, you know. And what is that something? Well, that something is that the Eibishter is going to show that he is appearing in the Mishkan. Well, that's basically the whole reason why the Mishkan was built, that it should be a dwelling place for Hashem, and through that it should be a dwelling place of Hashem in every individual Yid. Like we see that it's written in Parshat Truma, Vasuli Migdosh, V'shochanti B'soich Chom, that through the fact that you make me a Migdosh, I will dwell in the Yidden. I'll dwell in the Mishkan, but through that I will dwell in the Yidden. So it would appear that they've been doing this now for 7 days, all the preparations, and there's been no clear sign that Hashem is going to appear, or how is he going to appear, and in what way is that going to be recognizable, that hasn't been, that hasn't occurred so far. Mm-hmm. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to them all that today it is going to occur. That's for sure. If you take these korbanos and offer them in the order that I will tell you, then Hashem is going to appear. But even then, it didn't go, to use the expression, so easy, because Moshe and Aaron had to go into the Mishkan, and Rashi tells us at some length that they had to pray that the Shechina would in effect appear. And when did that happen? On this day, by Yom Shmini. Therefore, the Pasuk tells us and goes out of its way to say that this was Davke on the Yom Shmini. It was on the 8th day of the Miluim. Because the Pasuk could have said, it's written at the end of last week's Parsha, that they made 7 days of what you might call initiation of Miluim, for filling up and making ready and perfect the Mishkan for the dwelling of the Shechina. So it could have been just written, Ubemacharas El Hayomim, Moshe said, or the Macharat, or something like that. But it doesn't say that. It says, Vayi Bayema Ashmini. Well, from that it would appear the fact that it's the Yom Shmini, that's very key to the whole thing. And therefore Moshe goes on, he says, Vayi Bayem Shmini Moshe, and then he said, take this and this as offerings, as korbanos. If you do that, then Hayom, Hashem is appearing. So that would all tend to link with this whole idea of Yom Shmini. So we need to understand what is the special connection with the fact that it's the Yom Shmini. That will be understood on its own. If the Pasuk would just say that after the 7 days, immediately following that, Moshe did kafaka, I would have known it was the Yom Shmini. Why does the Pasuk say, Vayi Bayom Shmini? It would appear that all of these things are due to the fact that it's the Yom Shmini. It's the 8th day. We have to be mispointed. What is that? And furthermore, the whole thing becomes much more puzzling and much more built up and interesting. Well, listen, we want you to be enthusiastic, but you don't have to throw yourself on the floor, By the fact that in my Chumash I don't have his Pirush, in your Chumushim for sure not, but there's one of the great early period commentators that he was shortly after the Ramban, and he was called the Rabbeinu B'chai. That's how the Chassidim call him. But according to corrective writ, he's the Rabbeinu B'chai, and that was his name, B'chai. But the Chassidim call him Rabbeinu B'chai. That's the way we refer to him. And there were actually 2 Rabbeinu B'chai. There were 2 of them, One wrote a famous sefer, which I'm sure you've all heard of, and that's called the Choivas Alaboves. That was written by the Rabbeinu B'chai HaRishon. And this was the Rabbeinu B'chai HaSheni. He's got a whole pirush on the Chumash, most amazing. Similar to the Ramban. It goes in many ways, because he was like a follower from the Ramban. I don't know if he was actually a Talmud, it could be, but he certainly would have known the Ramban or known about him. So he says that it's not just the Yom Shmini, not just the 8th day, but he said there are many things connected with the Mishkan, what their number is 8. the Rabbeinu Bachye or Bachaye, yeah? And he reckons out a whole series of things which are 8. And he said that's very important to the whole Mishkan, and that's why the Pasuk tells me that all these wondrous appearances of the Shechina occurred on the 8th day. So can anybody tell me one thing about the Mishkan that is 8? Let's just see how you guys...
the silver lugs that hold things together. The silver sockets. That's the word. The silver sockets.
The sockets of the base of Mikdash, like the sockets.
The Mishkan.
Like the Mishkan.
No, there wasn't 8 though.
I don't know.
The sockets.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
No.
I suppose, somewhere or another you might get 8 depending where you started and where you finished. But let's just examine the Kohen Gadol, Aaron the Kohen. How many clothes did he have?
8.
8.
I'm going to say
He had 8 clothes.
8 garments.
And he had to have all of them on. If he came in to do his work with 1 cloth less, then that wasn't good. He was punishable for the Chas v'Sholem. And therefore we see that the 8 begodim are very key to the whole Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash. And then he says, if you take the Shemen HaMishcho and the Ketores, and you take the Ikar things that were in both of them, then you get 8. Each one is 4. Had 4 main. It had a lot of other things in it as well, but the 4 main spices in each of them was 4. And the 2 of them together makes up 8. And why do we reckon the 2 of them together? Because they're both very essential to the function of the whole, how do you call it? Because if hadn't been anointed with the Shemen HaMishcho, then they wouldn't have been able to be the initiation of the whole Mishkan. And he reckons out there all sorts of other things that they're 8. So now ask yourself the question, why would the Rabbeinu B'chaye, what he's so unbelievably informed about so many things, why would he spend time and he would interest his reader in knowing that a lot of things connected with the Mishkan are number 8, and they have to do with 8, and that's got to do with the amazing effect that they have. And we see it in Rashi. If we take a look at Rashi, Rashi says, Vayi bayem Shmini. So Rashi says, Shmini lamiluim hu. This is the 8th day of the Miluim, because they had 7 days of Miluim, and this is the 8th day. So, like we said, that could have been said in numerous ways. That could have been said Vayihi lamacharav, after the 7 days. It could have been done the next day, kafakak. So Rashi says the fact that this is Yom HaShmini, because it's Shmini of the Miluim, which means that we had to go through 7, and now we've got to this day. In other words, that this day is like a sort of a perfect follow-up of the 7. And then he says, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and this was the day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, because the Shivas Yemei Maluim were from Kov Gimel Oda through to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So Rashi said it was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Shehuka Mamishkon Boi Biyoim, that the day was put up on the day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So you might say, well, wait a minute, it was put up every day by Moshe and taken down. So what Rashi means, Hukam HaMishkan, he means that the Mishkan entered its full and perfect, how do you call it, function. Hukam. It's been put up in a finished way. But that was on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and Rashi says, V'notal Asora Atores. On this day of putting up the Mishkan, the 8th day of the Maluim, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, took 10 crowns. That's a very unusual expression. It took 10 crowns. Yeah. Hashnuyes b'Seder Olam. Now, Seder Olam is the name of a medrash. There's a medrash which it deals with the whole history from creation on the first day, all the way through, up until about the Churban Abayis Rishon, or something like that. It's a whole medrash, and it's called Seder Olam. So Rashi says, on these 10 crowns that this day took, found, they're mentioned in the Seder Olam, in the medrash called Seder Olam. So Rashi doesn't tell us what they are. It's interesting to try and figure. And there are differing opinions in Medrash Chazal as to what these 10 crowns are. 10 crowns. And there are differing opinions about it. But Rashi doesn't go into what they are and how they were functioning. He just says that this day took 10 crowns. Now, isn't the word crowns a rather unusual expression? I mean, 10 things happened on that day, or it took 10 significant activities, or something was done specially on that day. Yeah. Well, what does he mean by it took 10 crowns? Well, that would tend to indicate that each of these inyonim is like a crown of a king. Now, the crown of a king is very general in its effect. Once the king has a crown, then he's been initiated into what he's supposed to be doing. Before that, he's only an elect. He's not a king. Yeah? The crown makes him a king. Well, that's a very significant thing, as we know, in connection to Rosh Hashanah and all those things. So what does Rashi mean by saying that this day, mashma, that because it was the 8th day, it took 10 crowns? So why doesn't Rashi tell me there were 10 events that occurred on that and tell me what they are? He doesn't tell me what they are. He just said there were 10 crowns. You might be curious to know what they were. Look it up in Seder Olam. Yeah? He at least is kind enough to tell me where it's actually written, if I might be curious to know what the 10 things are. What that would intend to imply, I don't really need to know, but I need to know that it's 10 crowns. So ask yourself the question, what are all these things all about? So in order to lead us into the discussion, as is well accustomed in these classes, I tell you a story. So I'm going to tell you a rather interesting story, which I thought for numerous years that this story was only mentioned in Polish Sorim. You know, the hotline Chabadnikas call other Chassidim Polishers, which I'm not sure whether that's very complimentary, but anyway, that's the way it is. I saw it in a sefer where it quotes the Heilige Ruzhina as having mentioned this story. But the interesting thing is that the Rebbe brings down the story in a sefer, yeah. But I only found out years later that the Rebbe actually, when I first read the story, the Rebbe hadn't mentioned it yet. Only later the Rebbe mentioned it, and then it became part of the, what you might call the stories mentioned in Lubavitcher. What could be greater than the fact that the Rebbe, Be'atzmai, Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Rebbe mentions it, the story. So what is the story? The story is like this, that it's one on the Baal Shem Tov used to go out on journeys. You know that he never The Maggid, for example, he used to just sit in one place. The Maggid never went around. And he had Talmidim, and if he wanted to carry out certain things, he sent his Talmidim to do it. Yeah. For example, about Baron Klali, when he was one of the really great Talmidim, he was the most amazing. He went around, did all sorts of shlichas for the Maggid. And he made a lot of people into kshurim, el Maggid, Talmidei Chachomim, and learned people. And that's the way the Maggid did it. The Baal Shem Tov used to travel around. The Baal Shem Tov used to take his Talmidim, and he would go personally to all sorts of places. So one afternoon, the Baal Shem Tov says to the Talmidim that they should get together some loaves of bread and a little bit of food, because we're going out on a journey, but we're going to eat a Suda. So we'll need some lechem and, something to eat. So make sure you bring that along. So, and some tables, with something to put the food on. So, they're used to the Baal Shem Tov giving them rather mysterious instructions, so that's what they did. They gathered everything. Well, I thought you were one of our really sort of hotliners. You've been very capable cousin recently, so you've got to keep up your reputation. So they very faithfully and very devotedly, they gathered together the things at the Baal Shem Tov. And they drove out into the country, and all of a sudden they see a field with a sort of a lake-type river, what they call a nachal, a small river. So the Baal Shem Tov said, this is the place I had in mind. So they stopped, and the Baal Shem Tov said, we'll wash our hands in the water of the nachal, we'll take a kelim and wash our hands, and we're going to eat the Suda here in this field. Okay, so they noticed that in the field were a lot of behemoths. Yeah, what do you call it? Cattle, I suppose. Maybe other behemoths. But they didn't pay any attention to that. They weren't afraid or anything, and they were told that they to put up the tables. So they did, and after a while, the Baal Shem Tov himself washed his hands, and he made a moitzi, and he began to taste from the lechem, from the prusas hamoitzi. So all of a sudden, to their amazement, they noticed that all the behemoths in the field came over and were sort of looking at the table. And they were quite sure, exactly what to. All of a sudden, all the behemoths got up on their back legs and they stood upwards like this.
What?
And they all stood on 2 feet. They stood on 2 feet. So now, what is the Ika difference when it gets to feet between a behemoth and a mensch?
A behemoth is like this, and a mensch is like this.
So the brain rules the heart.
Yeah, a behemoth, he stands on 4 feet. And since that's the case, to a certain extent, his head is on the same level as his body, and maybe even his tail. There's a certain straight line. But he has 4 feet, and he's called by our sages a mahalich arba. That's what our sages call him, a goer on 4.
4-wheel drive.
What is a mensch? A mensch is called a mahalik stein. He only goes on 2, and the speciality of a mensch is that he has his cock right, facing the heavens, and the lower parts of him are lower down, and his feet especially are at the bottom, and he's like a vertical line going upwards, right? And that's not like a behemoth, because a behemoth is on four, and he's all one line, you know, and he doesn't look at the heavens. That was brought down in a Yom Yom, that one of the chief differences between a mensch and a behemoth is that a mensch looks at the heavens quite often. I mean, it's very easy and it's very accustomed for him to do that. Over behemoths, they don't look at the heavens. Have you ever noticed? The whole time their heads are in the grass, you know, in the food. The whole time their head is going. If you look at behemoths, I was once in South Africa and they took me out into a similar sort of place. I think it was like a forest with a lot of behemoths, and I watched them very carefully the whole time. Their head is down. You know. They don't look up at the heavens at all. Maybe on rare occasions.
Maybe on Yom Kippur.
So what happened to all these behemoths where the Baal Shem Tov was eating? All of a sudden they all get up like this. You know. They all stand on 2 feet. And they're all watching the Baal Shem Tov eating, and they're all standing, all of them, on 2 feet. So all the Talmudim, you know, it's just their eyes are all jumping out on stalks out of their heads. And what is this? You know, but that's what happened. So as long as the Baal Shem Tov was there, yeah, they stood on their feet. Yeah. When the Baal Shem Tov bent and they all got back into the coach and they all left, then as they were driving away, they watched all the behemoths came back down again.
What?
Yeah. All the behemoths fell back down. Now that's another idiom which I'm not really going into here. It's not really the purpose of my class. Are you okay?
Yeah.
It's, when the Baal Shem Tov drove away, they all went back down. So everybody was just, you know. So do you think that was an advantage or a disadvantage? That when the Baal Shem Tov drove away, they all came down again.
There was a makif.
It's not an advantage. They only stood up as long as he was there. Or when he drove away, they all came back down again. That means that as long as they were learning Chassidus, as long as they were exposed to directly, they were standing up. But once there was like a cessation, then they came back down again. In the Babbage, they used to say, that's not the case. When you learn Chassidus Chabadska, oh, you guys. Yeah, when you learn Chassidus Chabadska, then that's clear on you that your behemoth stands up and it doesn't go back down again. Even when you leave, you're still going on, your behemoth is still going on 2 feet. Yeah. So that's that's a mitzvah. So everybody asks himself, you know, what's happening with his behavior? Is it back on 2 feet or is it not? So ask yourself the question, what was the significance of the Baal Shem Tov having done such a thing? You know, why would we think for a moment, what was his aim in taking the Talmudim to see an amazing phenomenon of this sort? What's it all about? Okay, so we're now going to go back to our question about the 8th day, and hopefully that'll lead us. So, could anybody suggest normally within Yiddishkeit, when I say normally, within Yiddishkeit, we have a cycle of a certain number, but it's not 8.
7.